have a terrific show today. Today we have Kate OLoughlin. Kate is COO North America of SuperAwesome, and she'll be joined by Jamie Gutfreund. Jamie's a senior advisor to the company. She's also served in executive roles as CMO of Hasbro, as well as at WPP. So she's no stranger to the business. They'll be talking about the wonderful world of children's entertainment and a lot of the regulations, considerations that are unique to that space. Before I invite them on to the call, let me make a couple of announcements. One is, please introduce yourself on the chat. The chat's been a really vibrant source of discussion, and I've been meeting people in chat. I had a meeting this morning with someone I met in chat last week. So it's great if you just introduce yourselves. You can have discussions and get to know each other. I'm sure you'll see other people who you know. Also, when you have questions, please put them in the Q&A button. You'll see both buttons, Q&A and chat. One other comment about chat is the chat is set up with the drop down just saying panelists. You need to change that to panelists and attendees so that everybody sees it. Otherwise, it just goes to Jamie, me, and Kate. And of course, you want everyone to see your chat, so change it to panelists and attendees. All right, without further ado, let me introduce Jamie and Kate. Take it away.
Hello, everybody. I hope you guys all have your martinis. We're going to go pretend we're old school and expense accounts and martinis and long lunches. So as Ned said, thanks for having us on today. It's such an interesting topic. We're all dealing with kids at home or friends of ours or colleagues of ours that have kids at home, and we're seeing new behaviors in ways that I'm sure many of us have never perceived possible. The amount that we're learning, seeing, it's exciting and it's scary. But I'm excited that we get to have a conversation today to put a lot of these new behaviors into a business context. And I am honored to be joined by my colleague, Kate OLoughlin, and Kate is the expert. So we're going to get down to what matters with kids, how to not be Zoom, what you can and cannot do in the kids market, and really be able to dig into this. So Kate, welcome.
Thanks, Jamie. So happy to do this with you today.
Yes. What else would we be doing? I mean, you know, martini lunches and having long meetings. No, this is great. Before we get started, SuperAwesome, besides the fact that the name is so fantastic, and I just like saying I'm working with SuperAwesome.
Yeah.
Could you give a little bit of a description? I say we're an advertising technology and privacy-based company, but please give the audience a bit more information.
Yeah, we call ourselves a kid tech company, which means we're providing all the infrastructure, services, products to help companies have a compliant interaction with kids on any device, on phones, streaming devices like OTT or CTV, desktop, of course, tablets, even gaming consoles, and even connected toys. So what we're trying to do is make sure that anytime a kid is engaging with a brand, with a company, a piece of content, that engagement isn't in violation with any of the global data privacy regulations or is inappropriate or irresponsible in the connection. And so how this usually manifests is we're helping protect like ad transactions. So if a kid is interacting with a brand, we make sure that no data is leaking out of advertisements. Or if a kid is trying to engage with other kids and build some sort of community, maybe they're all watching a video together on a cool platform and they want to talk to each other about how cool it is, or maybe they want to share a piece of content that they've created or they've designed, we make sure that anything that they're putting into the world is compliant, that they're not posting any personal information about themselves unless their parent has consented to it. In the cases where a company needs a piece of personal information to make the game work or make the service work, we help get that right kind of consent in the eyes of the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, who in the US sets the laws for what is compliance with kids. So we are really, our goal is to make sure anytime a kid is online that anything that they're doing is safe, appropriate, and right by them and right by their parents and legislators and litigators.
Litigators. So pre-COVID, this world was getting, was a big topic of conversation, money talks. The FTC had slapped some hands of YouTube and TikTok and a few others. And now with COVID, it's kind of a perfect storm. We're seeing so many kids online, and I love the fact this is a mission-based company. But you talked a little bit about compliance. What does that actually mean? It's so confusing. There's COPA, there's TCPA, there's all those things. Could you sort of lay that out a little bit, and then we'll get into some more details. Thank you.
Yeah, so the laws you have in the US have been around for over 20 years, but they do keep getting modernized in the way that we people consider what can you know about a person when they're online. And what the FTC wants to do when they enforce these laws is make sure that if a kid is revealing who they are, that the parent is the one who's in control of who gets to know who their kid is. And the how can you identify a child is really important to the baseline of understanding about compliance laws, because what's considered to be personally identifiable for children is much stricter than what's considered personally identifiable for parents or adults. So for kids, you can't use a browser cookie that is often used in marketing to personalize or identify people across multiple websites. That's off limits for kids. Precise geolocation, you can't know where a kid is by their lat long unless you ask a parent's permission or get parents' verified consent first. So these are things that we typically use on adult platforms to have personalized content, personalized ads, personalized experiences, but are off limits for kids. And so the data privacy laws are all about protecting personal information of children. And because this definition for kids is so much stricter for adults, that puts many companies in sort of a tricky situation that they can't use all these platforms or use all these technologies that power the internet for adults, because they all rely on taking these bits of data that are not allowed for kids. So that's why many companies get a little worried, or they feel like this is too hard with kids, because you need some special things that don't rely on personal data for these kids' audiences.
So I think it's so fascinating that you are in this space. I'm going to digress for a minute because I like to bring in the personal part. Could you, when we first met, you were explaining how you got into this world, because a few years ago, it was considered a little bit more niche. Now it's exploding. What were you doing pre-SuperAwesome that led you to this world?
Yeah, so for the decade before coming to SuperAwesome, I was working in advertising technology, and indeed working on all those platforms that collect as much data as possible so that when you deliver an ad, it's a very personalized ad. So I was working in cross-screen identity with Tap Ad, and I was working in programmatic very early days with Media Math, and it was sort of building how all the sausage is made to make the internet be powered for free by advertising, essentially. And now I sort of consider myself a vegetarian. So I'm off the meat, I'm off the data, and now I'm a vegetarian here at SuperAwesome when it comes to data, because we can't use it here. So that's what I've been in this ad world and technology powering the internet for quite a while now. But before this, I was building mission control systems for military satellites. So not this at all. I'm an engineer by education, but I haven't written code professionally in quite a long time.
So for military, I love that phrase, vegetarian. So I guess that makes me the ultimate carnivore, because how do we use this data to sell things? No, I have a heart. I guess it's my Gen X soul that's trying to figure out commerce. But and it's kind of interesting. I feel in some of my background, for working at Creative Artists Agency or at Hasbro or at WPP, you always bump up against this, what is perceived as a blocker. And actually, Laura, we have a poll question I think that we should put out there about this, because I want to kind of get a sense of who's out there and where people are with this under 16 audience. But it does, and the question is, in your business, who owns the under 16 audience and strategy? So I think that's going to be one of those things that, typically nobody does. And let's talk a little bit about since we're now identifying that this is an opportunity, how do most companies go about this if they are trying, balancing out the carnivores and the vegetarians in the company? Is there business to be done with kids? And how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the big misconceptions, that you just can't do anything with kids online, and that's absolutely not the case. You can engage an under 16 audience, and in fact, you should. And the should is because they're a very powerful audience. They're a gigantic audience. There's 170,000 kids that go online for the first time every single day. And those kids become, bigger kids who then talk to their parents about, what kind of movies they're going to watch, what kind of toys are going to come to the house. And then they get a little older, and then they decide on what kind of gaming console is going to be part of their household. And they get a little older and they decide what kind of deodorant they're going to wear. And so the kids have an incredible amount of power and control, and there are a lot of them. And so you should think about this audience, and you can engage with them. It's just that you have to have a special touch, that you can't use personal information like we were talking about before without parental consent. And so sometimes organizations, unfortunately, think of it as a blocker when really they should be thinking about it as an opportunity.
I'm watching the poll come in. It's really interesting. Right now, at the moment, it's mostly the product team owns this, but I do see a fair amount of the CEO's kid is in charge, and lawyer, which is interesting. And actually, the smallest amount is not marketing. It's mostly the lawyers. But let's talk about that, because sometimes, and I've had these conversations lately, people don't think of kids unless you're in the kids business. Okay, fine. And you just mentioned that beyond pest or power, there's a lifetime value to reaching kids. One of the things that we're seeing are these amazingly huge numbers with the behavior shifts post-COVID. Yeah. So I'll throw out some stats that we were talking about before this. Roblox, I know Craig Donato was on a couple weeks ago as a guest on this podcast, on this webinar. Roblox just got 4 million concurrent users, which is huge. Fortnite, Minecraft, Roblox are all seeing, close to 120 to 150 million monthly active users. There's a lot of time being spent. And so if you figure out how to talk to this audience, it seems like it's not just an option, it's a business mandate going forward, because I don't know, the question will be, do they go back to pre-COVID? How do you reach this audience? And on top of that, that time is also added to the fact they're going on YouTube and Twitch and watching more content that is about gaming and playing. So they're gaming, they're playing, they're socializing, and then they're watching it. How do people access this audience? Is this a trend and a shift that's permanent?
So yeah, in my opinion, and what we talk about in sort of the people who are looking deep into this usage data, especially during COVID now, is that we think that this is a pretty permanent shift. So what we're seeing in the data is that kids are spending double the screen time. And when it comes to education platforms, we're seeing a 5x increase in time spent on these education platforms. And so, of course, there's only so many hours in the day, and when school changes again, and we're not only on homeschooling, which is kind of a shorter day, so there is more entertainment time in the house. Yeah, sure, we might see some of this traffic go down, but I think that this is a permanent impact on how families live and how kids learn and how kids communicate. I mean, if you think about just the dynamic between grandparents and children and how this has COVID has changed that relationship, and how much they're relying now on video chat more than they might have before. These are the sorts of things that you start to teach your grandparent how to do, and then they want more of it, and the kid wants more of it, and that's an impact that will keep going further post-COVID, is this change in their relationship, or the tools that they use to facilitate the relationship.
I'm watching the chat. It's interesting. A few people on here. Andrea, who is watching us from DC. Andrea De Silva, hello, Andrea De Silva, who's a privacy expert and trade. We also have Adam Monash and David Kleeman. This is really is interesting. David Kleeman actually has a comment. He says, I don't think data we see now is relevant to what will happen post-pandemic. I don't know. I'm going to throw that one out there as a little digression. What do you think, Kate?
Well, I mean, I don't think Zoom is going to go back to only having 12 million or 10 million monthly active users. They went from 10 million to, I think it was 200 million users in 3 months. And that's a platform that hadn't ever seen kids before, or didn't ever have to think about children. And certainly weren't in headlines that included the words Zoom, children, and Elizabeth Warren wants to know what's going on with kids' data in Zoom. And I don't think they're going to go back, right? They're not going to go back to 10 million. Now Zoom is part of the household vocabulary. It's so crazy. Our CEO Dylan points out that, Zoom built as much credibility inside of a family in 3 months as Netflix has in years. So my 4-year-old, my 5-year-old knows what it means to Zoom. And that's not going to go, the cat's not going to go back into the bag. So the data that we see about the popularity of video chat apps and ways that kids form community by trying to seek each other out digitally and not just physically, I think that's here to stay. What do you think, Jeannie?
I agree. I agree. And I think some of that community is really evolving in real time as we speak, just because there's so much opportunity now. A lot of people are talking about Netflix Party, being able to watch Netflix synced up. There's an app called Pop-In, which is a gaming, play board games and together. Even the New York Times crossword puzzle you can do together now. So it's this whole communal opportunity is not going back. We actually did some research on trolls recently. Do you feel like we can, I'm putting you on the spot here, but could you share a little bit about the social sharing aspect of it? I thought that was pretty fascinating.
Yeah,
we talked to, what, 1,000 kids?
And we'll say much more about this later, but that idea of watching together, just for people who didn't know, Trolls is the Trolls World Tour. Trolls 2 skipped the theater and went straight to streaming, straight to release on streaming. And so, the rhetoric we're hearing about it is that it was very successful despite not being in theater. And that going straight to streaming starts the conversation of, well, I still want to watch it together with someone. I want to enjoy it. I want to have that kind of like event part of this new release, something that we were so excited about. So how does that change? And would people, pay to have some kind of interaction from their living room and their friend's living room, but they're watching it together? And the answer is yes. People want to do that, and people want to pay for it. So it's another one of these opportunities, which as a company you would think about, building software, launching a new product or launching a new app to facilitate this community interaction. But you would, there's a lot of sort of things that you have to get in place to go after that opportunity. The opportunity is big, really, really big for kids. We just have to do especially as we're talking about before.
Yeah, you mentioned pre-COVID, one of the stats that we talk about is every day 170,000 kids would go online for the first time. Mm-hmm. And Dylan also likes to talk about, the internet was not built for kids. And for those of us who are around long enough to remember what the early days of the internet, we're like, I don't think the internet is still built for even adults. We're seeing it's really challenging. So the Wild West, and there's a lot of challenges, and yet we need this content. And we say one of the topics we talk about now is, right now everybody is a kid and family brand. Mm-hmm. Can you unpack that a little bit? It's a call to action, but what does that mean, and what does our audience need to think about?
Yeah, so with kids spending that much more screen time on screen, doubling their time or spending 5x more time in an education mindset, but now in digital, kids are seeking out and in discovery mode of more places to go. And parents need help in sort of navigating that. And they need help even just trying to balance what's going on in their house as they're trying to work from home or take care of someone. And so when you think about every brand right now, they have to help the family in some way, and be trusted by the family in some way, and provide relief for the family, the parents and the children alike in some way. So when you think about how brands are talking about how they are supporting their employees, that translate, well, how then are you supporting us as a community or us as a family? Or when you think about, providing relief out to the community, also providing relief into the home dynamic, injecting some humor, injecting some fun and things, and trying to keep out sort of the negative news. And so that goes for everyone who's, any brand who's in entertainment. If you're a snack brand, if you are, any sort of toy brand or anything in between, even, fashion and personal care and self-care, every brand really has to think about the family dynamic and how they're going to engage everyone in the household. We saw some funny data about when we asked families, who controls what you're doing in the day, what you're being entertained by, what you're playing with. And parents say, I'm the one that controls it. And then kids say resoundingly, no, I'm the one who controls what I'm doing, what I'm seeing, what I'm watching, what I'm hearing, what I'm playing. And so the reality is probably somewhere in the middle. And that just sort of underscores the fact that every brand has to think about the whole family dynamic and think about how they're perceived as trustworthy, how they're providing relief, and how they're providing value in, because everyone in the home has a role to play in their entertainment decision making, for sure.
And brands that don't necessarily, as you pointed out, think of themselves as family brands. Like I saw Whirlpool did a really fantastic content effort around chores. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that Whirlpool had ever considered talking to kids directly, but it was unexpected. It got a lot of attention, and it was really, really quite well done. We have a few favorites that we talk about brands that are doing things in addition to content, but some brands you might expect and might not expect. I don't know if there's any you want to call out, either good or bad right now.
Yeah, I think, Audible is a really great example. They took down their paywall for kids content, and they're providing all of those hours and hours worth of someone reading and great, content, great audio content for families. And that's another company that underscores that they're providing value. It's not junk. They're providing, these audiobooks to families. They're providing relief, something a kid can do by themselves, and a parent can go off and, take care of someone or do their work from home. And they're trustworthy. It's a name known for great content. So we really, that's like Audible, great example of somebody who's doing the right thing here in COVID. Maybe I'll point out actually
and a great opportunity.
What's that? Go ahead, Jamie.
No, go ahead.
Maybe I'll even point out TikTok as someone who's doing interesting things here in COVID. It's controversial on whether or not that's actually a place where kids should be, but they certainly are there on TikTok. Some of the things that they're doing are, having and encouraging an open dialogue about being at home together. They have the Happy at Home hashtag where they're going live every day with different topics. Like they had a prom themed week last week, all those poor high school kids that didn't get to go to prom, but being a place where people can talk about that. And again, providing relief. If you have anxiety about missing prom, providing value. It's a place where you can go and spend time together. They have Motivation Monday. And they're reaping the rewards of going after that opportunity. So some stats I saw on eMarketer today is that monthly time spent is now 8 hours in TikTok as compared to 5 hours in Instagram. And so they're giving people time to go and, opportunity to go and spend time. And so the value of the company and engaging this community, especially this younger community, is having great effects on, the success of the company. It's a real opportunity.
But again, going back to what you said, it's controversial.
Yeah.
And that idea of trust, which in our world, no matter where you sit globally, what
Mm-hmm.
country you're in, how old you are, anywhere, trust seems to be the thing that everyone is really hoping for. And it's a you know, table stakes for everybody, for content creators, for games, for brands. It's such an important component. And I hear you talk about this is a reckoning, this whole COVID moment right now for brands and kids, because they're being exposed, and you can do things the right way, or you can wait and see if you get caught. Could you be even a little bit prescriptive about let's talk about the things that you can do as a brand to make sure that you're taking care of the trust. And then we can also talk about some of the examples of things that allow that you can then benefit from, so competitions. But like, what are some of the basic things that a company right now should be looking at in order to be prepared, in order to engender that trust that's so critical?
Yeah. So first things first, you know, we really recommend having someone in your organization be your chief children's officer. Someone who's, you know, responsible for thinking about all the different ways in which kids are interacting with your product, whether you intended for them or not. And I'll just point out this bit of intention, Jamie, before I go back and answer it a little bit more completely. But California now has the CCPA, the California Privacy Protection Act. And the interesting addition that they put in for kids is not just that they aged kids up to 16 from our federal line, which is 13. So now kids in California are up to 16-year-olds. The other thing they added is this idea of willful disregard. So if kids start to congregate in your service, even if you didn't intend for them to come, or even if you didn't build it thinking that kids would come, if you get clues or you get information that kids have arrived en masse to your product or your service, you become responsible for meeting the standards for data privacy regulation. So even that's the kind of, when we talk about having a chief children's officer in your organization, they're the person who should be thinking about, well, how do we know where the kids are hanging out? What are they doing? And what should we be doing to accommodate them and let them in, rather than just ignoring them? Because ignorance is no longer bliss, especially in California with this concept of just willful disregard, which wasn't so clear federally in the US. You can't ignore them. You have to be responsible for them. And that's sort of, you know, kind of piling on to the settlement that the FTC had with YouTube in the fall, is that YouTube had previously just been ignoring or saying, you know, everybody here is over 13, and their reckoning came and they said, no, you can't ignore them. They're obviously there. Your lawyers can't say that they're not there. They're obviously there. And so they had their reckoning, and so we just can't ignore them anymore. So having someone who is your chief children's officer is sort of a signal that you are thinking about it, and you have someone who's responsible for it. And then that person, along with everybody else, then has the obligation to educate themselves. So it's not just the lawyers that have to know the policy when it comes to kids. Your product folk, your marketing folk, your salespeople, your customer service representatives, everybody has to know and enforce your policies around what to do with kids and kids' data. There's probably some changes you're going to have to make to your platform. So having a roadmap with your engineering team of how you are going to adapt your product to let kids in, or at least accommodate what they're going to be doing, or, you know, being really clear on what they can do and what they can't do as an audience in your platform is important. And then when it comes to trustworthiness, Jamie, I think one thing that's important is transparency. So transparency may be in your privacy policies, and not having it all be just legal gibberish, like actually having something that people can understand and digest of how you're using their data and how you're using their kids' data is super important, of things you should be doing, and you will get rewarded for doing it, having it in a structured way.
Well, I was just looking at the questions. Andra Dallas just said that her 11-year-old, who is on TikTok, thank you for sharing that, Andra, says that she gets kicked off of live streams because of how she looks. How does a company that's at scale start to decide, okay, willful disregard, what does that mean? And there are companies, so TikTok is obviously one of those that knows kids are on there, but what about a company that's creating an app and it's iffy? They're kind of in the gray area. Like Nike has an app that is helping kids is helping people customize shoes. What are some of the regulations? How should companies be looking at those kind of things?
Yeah, I think it should actually, before you start looking at the regulation, you should have the open conversation internally of how can you say yes to kids and not just find ways to either really or artificially kick them out, or maybe look in the regulation for finding loopholes of ways that you can sort of get around or kind of wave your hands about whether or not you are correctly handling this group. You know, before you kind of jump into the rules, jump into your organization and say, let's let kids configure their own Nikes, because we know if we make them a Nike fan, then they're going to be a Nike fan for the rest of their lives, as an example. That's definitely a place to start. And you know, unfortunately, in the example of TikTok of like kicking people out because they look too young, there's other ways that this manifests, and to understand whether kids are on your platform or not, or want to use your service or not, it's unfortunately not just a computer's job. You actually have to have humans who are thinking about and like looking at your user base and having conversation and engaging with them to know and figure out what part of your audience is in fact kids. It's got to be a mix of computers and humans, even down to moderation.
Well, that's no small thing. I mean, let's not just like idly go by and say it's a mix of humans and computers. I mean, it's sophisticated AI, but for example, it's SuperAwesome. It's hand curated. I know that Roblox was talking about this too, because there are certain things that you have to look for that we can't rely on computer, and we go that extra step. The company's mission is making the internet safer for kids, so it's not just checking the box. Yeah. One of the things, you know, and that's a big deal. Can you talk about how human moderation is incorporated into this trust component?
Yeah, you know, moderation, some people often think about it as just kicking the bad actors out. And that's obviously one thing that moderation has to do. And bad actors are identified from algorithms, but they also have to be identified through, you know, through humans sort of just knowing. If you think back to YouTube's pedophilia incident, this time last year, where there were timestamps in the comments that identified when in a video a kid was doing something that, you know, somebody found provocative in a strange way. That couldn't have been found by computers. That had to be found by humans. And that's, you know, an example of the role of both in moderation. And that's sort of kicking people out or identifying bad actors and rejecting them. But the other role of moderation is to actually help the community form, or to like help the path set in a more positive, in a positive way, and you sort of help people figure out what are the rules. And so in Pop Jam, our social platform, as an example, you know, it's become a place that's very positive. It's very, you know, kindness is trending all the time inside of Pop Jam, but you have to like let kids be kids, and you can't just tell them no, or kick you out. They don't learn then what is like the right way to interact with each other, and what are the sort of the social norms of in being in a positive community. So moderation is also about that, of like helping shape the community, let it thrive and grow, but like sort of help kind of shape what kids understand and with their maturity of how to interact with each other. And that's got to be done.
That's such a and that's such a shift in how people are parenting. I think we're getting to the stage now with people and parents. Maybe it's a brand approach to kids, as well as we can't wrap them in bubble wrap anymore. They have to learn.
Yeah.
So how do you give them that balance of an opportunity so that they actually develop those skills that none of us grew up having? We learned how to, I guess, answer the phone politely. That was a kid skill that you needed to learn back in the day. That's no longer necessary. Let's talk a little bit about creators. One of the let's put the second poll up.
Yep.
As well, Laura. Thank you. And also the Q&A button, for some reason, it could be me. I'm not seeing questions. So if there are questions that you guys are asking, I can see the chat. Please feel free to put them in the chat, or if Ned or Laura wants to throw out some of the questions, that's good too. I know that I see a few there, but I can't open it.
Yeah.
But Kate, let's talk about, oh, feel free, you go ahead.
Okay.
I don't know if there's anything in there that you want to answer.
Yeah, if you want to do the poll, that would be good.
Let's do the poll, Laura, the next poll. Is it up? Here we go. Okay. Nope. We'll get it up. I'll keep talking while we get the poll up.
Yeah.
There you go. Let's talk about creators and influencers. I see a fair amount of people on here. I see people from Pocket Watch. Thank you for joining.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about their role in this and the shift and how SuperAwesome is really building an environment, because you talk about how much content we need. Everyone's a kid and family brand, which to me says we need a lot more content that's appropriate. What's happening with SuperAwesome content creators? Is this a good time to be a content creator? How are we enabling them? I mean, to say nothing of, we need as much creativity as we possibly can in the world right now. But let's talk a little bit about the content creators.
Yeah, so, you know, macro-wise, I think it is a good time to be a creator because this generation of kids values authenticity and they want to be considered real, and they follow people who are real. That word real comes up a lot in our research. And so that's why creators have become so incredibly popular and so influential in children these days and under 16s. But it's also a tricky time to be a creator, especially after YouTube had its settlement and sort of pushed the onus of data protections back onto creators, and creators had to make the choice of deciding whether or not they were a creator for kids, and that would have some implications on then what features or what kind of ads could show up in front of their content, and would affect essentially how much revenue that they could make. So at SuperAwesome, we see that that kind of dichotomy of like, creators are so important to this audience, but creators are really struggling to figure out how they're going to connect in a way that's safe and have revenue in a way that's safe. And so one of the things that we're launching is a platform called Ruckus. And this is meant to fill the space of connecting kids and creators together in a safe place that is appropriate for that tricky 8 to 13-year-old. I mean, there's a ton of stuff in the world. It's often, frankly, mostly subscription, which has its own problems when it comes to, you know, accessibility by a lot of different kinds of people in our world. But there's a ton of stuff for preschool up to like 2nd grade, but then that becomes too babyish. My 7-year-old knows that, like, you know, noggin is for babies, but my 5-year-old really loves it. And so she's looking for the next thing. And the next thing that, you know, mom doesn't have to pay for yet another thing. So we're building Ruckus to be this place where that tricky audience, that tween audience, where they're not ready for Snap, they're not ready for TikTok, but they do want to have that interaction with creator. We're working on that now, which is really exciting because it's video first, it's creator first, and it's meant to, of course, help kids that we're talking about and getting access to all that content that we need, Jamie, to keep them entertained, but also then helping the creator community be connected to their audience, but in a way that's safe and appropriate and responsible.
And a big opportunity. And I love the fact that, as you said, it's not going to be paid for, because one of the topics that we do talk about is the have and have nots of content. And are we looking at a world where families that can afford no advertising are not seeing ads, and then the families that can't are inundated with content that is just ad supported? So good, again, mission-based. And great to see that SuperAwesome is sticking with that.
Yeah.
Can
We don't think that data privacy.
I don't know if that was you or me freezing. This is the real world of webinars. I love the, okay, let's see, a question posted elsewhere. Are you seeing any data? Can you hear me, Kate?
Yeah.
You can hear me, okay. A question posted elsewhere, Steve Lebling. Are you seeing any data or collecting any insights from kids that the pandemic has them watching more content on traditional screens and with other family members? And if there are indications they may move away from devices as a first choice when normalcy returns? So the question is, are they going to go back?
Yeah. Well, what we see is they're doing more of everything. And so yes, they're probably watching more TV, but I do think that because they're spending their education time and they're spending their connection time with friends and with their family on digital, that they will spend much more time on those devices, and that linear, like the good old traditional TV and Saturday morning cartoons, is going to become even less relevant. And that's the trend that we've been seeing up until, COVID, and now it's just accelerated that much more. They're using devices for so many other parts of their day, not just sort of the lean back entertainment. They're not, they were using devices just, for lean back, watching YouTube, streaming things. They might have been playing some games, with their thumbs on their phones, but now they're using the screens to lean in more, to learn, to talk, to chat, to, become part of a community. And once they've leaned into these devices, that leaning back and just watching TV on your couch, that kind of TV just happens to you. I think that's going to go away. And now kids are going to get much more, I'm going to control this. I'm going to be the one who's engaging. I'm going to be the one who's using my devices to do much more interactive content.
So paint a picture. What can people do that they've probably thought that they can't? I know we were talking about competition.
Oh yeah.
Examples of some of the good stuff that they can still do if you're doing it the right way?
Yeah, totally. So that competitions that you're mentioning, we worked with Milk, the milk organization that promotes dairy milk, not almond milk, dairy milk. And they wanted to run a Mess with Your Milk competition where kids could do science experiments with milk and then, submit their entry and win a prize if they were the winner. You can do these things. You can have kids provide, user-generated content, but the special things that you have to do, as an example, is make sure that if you're not going to go down the path to try to get the right kind of consent for parents, that those submissions don't include any PII. It's not just that they don't have the kid's name written on it, is that you can't see their face, because photos of faces are PII, or that maybe the chief scientist of the Mess with Your Milk entry, you couldn't see them, but maybe their little brother or their sweatshirt of their elementary school that named, that they went to this particular school. That's all, identifying. So in that kind of context of competition, it's really fun. Kids get really buzzy about it. It's high value because they're doing science with milk. It's, you can trust it. It's milk, it's milk. Who doesn't trust milk? It's providing relief. It's something fun to do. So it's all good and important and worthwhile for Milk to invest in. They just had to make these special amendments to make sure that they weren't collecting any personal information, and that's what we helped them do.
And I know there's another brand that we're not allowed to talk about, but it's a global, let's see if I can do this in an appropriately sneaky way, sneaky yet appropriate. It's a global game company that needed identification. We were able to provide geolocation. That's another thing that you are able to get to get parental consent around.
Yeah. So in that case, kids had to provide their precise lat long. And the value of them doing that was high enough for us to go down all the steps to get parental consent, get parents to verify that they are in fact an adult, which is hard to do, and then give consent. And so you can do these really fancy location-based VR type experiences. You just, again, have to go down the proper steps to get consent. Another really cool thing that we did was help connect kids' digital fun and play to e-com. We were working with this interactive company called Echo, which is a joint venture with Walmart. And they wanted to, sort of replace that feeling that we used to get in the 80s going into Toys R Us, but they knew that they had to do that digitally to meet kids where they are. So this really, 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 really fun and cool experience where kids could go and play with the toy, and they could, interact with creators who were like influencers and sort of, see how they played with it, and they could, make choices to make the thing red or open or close or shut or, explode. And then once they loved that product, they could put it into their wish list. And then that wish list became the entry point then to have a conversation to the parent to say, your kid has put this on their wish list. Would you like to buy this now in e-com? So you can do that. We help the kid stay a kid. We let the kid play. We let the kid interact. And then we left the e-com experience to the parents, but we made that connection together. And that worked really well.
So it is possible.
It is possible.
It is possible. You just have to know the right people.
Okay.
I'm going to read some of the results of our poll. So the second question is, do you consider under 16s as an audience that can contribute to growth and or increase your, I think it was revenue that was on there. And 72% said yes and are trying to do it right. Oh, my
Awesome.
Heart beats so proudly. I'm so happy for everybody. I love this. My cynical self. The third question is, we think the pandemic will forever change screen time behaviors, increase time and less supervision. Do you? And we have most people, 55% strongly agree. And then 38% agree. And we only have about 2% that disagree. So I think we're all in alignment on that one. The last poll question before we wrap up is, which macro trend observed in kids' time spent has the most opportunity in entertainment? And it looks like the winner is group interactive digital content, which is community. And that's 55%. And then the next largest one is 17, which is video chat. So I think what we're seeing is community, even post-COVID. This is an opportunity for kids to kind of, when they go into the metaverse and live their lives digitally and physically all in one continuum. Mm-hmm. But words of wisdom, final words of wisdom, Kate, to our audience out there. And thanks everybody for being so patient and attending with no question.
I would just say, kids are an audience to say yes to. They're not going away. They're super powerful. And it's worth it to go through those steps to handle them specially. Say yes to kids. Don't say no.
Say yes to kids and do the right thing. And thank you, Mike Morehouse. Thank you, Craig Almazine. We had some really lovely chat going on here. This is great. If you have any questions, Kate OLoughlin is at SuperAwesome. They do regular webinars, produce research, and are available as consultants, advisors, and I like to say they're the McKinsey of kids. So stay tuned, and thanks for your time, Kate. It was great to chat with you.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Kate. It was a terrific show today. Thanks, everybody, for coming out and participating and enjoying the chat. Tomorrow's show, I will moderate tomorrow with my good friend and colleague, Damon Lau. Damon is head of esports and gaming at United Talent Agency, and we have a lot to talk about. So join us at the same time, noon Pacific. See you tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody.